So I'm going to discuss something that's dear and near to my heart. One of the first books I ever wrote was on drug and nutrient interactions. Interesting, as we work towards healthy aging and anti-aging, the fact is a lot of our patients come in on meds. They're also, of course, through the aging process, having endogenous nutrients become lower and lower in their body. Sure, we're going to talk about hyaluronic acid today, we're going to talk about nitric oxide, but we're going to talk about some other things as well. So, what about the aging process? You're all here because you see the same thing I do in my 20 years of clinical practice. Our population is aging and is not doing so well. We see in our youth autism on the rise. We see Alzheimer's now the 6th leading cause of death in America. What's happening with the neurological, cardiovascular, and more importantly, as Dr. Teitelbaum has spoken, the cellular functioning of the human body. We are getting older, but we don't have to act old. What's interesting is my neighbor gentleman, a guy named Bill, actually 2.5 years ago saw me shoveling snow. And he says, "Chris, I was worried about you." Well, Bill has, for the last 50 years, had never stopped weightlifting, never stopped eating well, and he's a monster of a man. You poke on him, he says, it's hard as a rock. Indeed he is. 17.5-inch arms, phenomenal, healthy guy. He's not going to allow chronological aging to take over. He's all about the biological aging process. We all know patients and friends and family, and maybe yourself, which enjoy a younger biological age, and that's what it's all about. How do we take care of ourselves? Unfortunately, not all of our patients are like Bill. They haven't taken care of themselves for 50 years. They come in broken. And so we have to look at, are they properly nourished? They may be on acid blockers. They may be having celiac or Crohn's or one of what I call the catch-22 of GI disease. They got gut issues, they're taking a med for it, or they're just having the diarrhea or constipation. They're not absorbing, they're becoming more malnourished, and as a result they're becoming sicker and sicker. We see the biochemical pathways, and we know them well. We learned about them as clinicians, not really knowing how do they apply to patients. We just had to memorize them, regurgitate them, pass the exam, and move on to the next class. But as you look here at active substances like thiamine pyrophosphate, I also use my practice benfotiamine, active forms of nutrients, because not everybody can absorb things. Likewise, you're going to see that wonderful methylation pathway. We know that cyanocobalamin for some people may help, but we know that methylcobalamin is a biologically active form, and through the aging process, we need more of the bio-ready substances. So when you look at this laundry list of essential nutrients over here, you're going to see, of course, the vitamin A, which, of course, now is known to help modulate TH3. We know about TH1, TH2, autoimmunity, and we've all loved vitamin D. Well, what about TH3 and vitamin A levels? Likewise, the active forms of folic acid, methyl tetrahydrofolate. Many of us know there's a drug out in the marketplace used for depression called Deplin. I'm not associated with it. I prescribe it for some of my patients with depression. All it is methylfolate, active form of folic acid. They have found that 7 out of 10 people with depression symptoms are low and actually respond well to methylfolate. Is that a surprise to us, healthy aging practitioners? No, because we know that 1 out of 10 people actually have an overt methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase enzyme defect. So using bioactive substances, supporting the fact that the body doesn't do things as well as maybe it used to, particularly relative to epigenetics, our modulation and maturation process of our gene pool. So what about prevention? What about disease? Well, the research is very clear, and at a very conventional standard model, they looked at what nutrients do they overtly and commonly find low in people. Protein, well, welcome to all those amino acids we need, like tyrosine for epinephrine, norepinephrine, and dopamine. Well, what about some tryptophan absorption? Well, of course, absorption is important. Likewise, the B6 and the cofactors, which we'll discuss today, relative to the wonderful Krebs cycle, the urea pathway, and whatnot. But also iron. Welcome to anemia. And of course, we know that with gentlemen getting older, they get into andropause and they get this normocytic anemia, and we have to address that because now they're hypoperfusing their tissues, they're not getting oxygen, and so you all sit there. 20% of your oxygen is going to your brain. Only 5% of it's in your capillaries, but once again, your oxygen needs are very high in the brain, but of course now we see cognitive decline, cardiovascular issues, all the things which we don't want to see happen with our patients. So the elderly, of course, are a population which we need to pay attention to. But beyond that, of course, dentition becomes a problem. They either have dentures, they have implants, they're not chewing as well, and also poverty becomes a huge issue. Even patients coming to seek out of pocket, let alone our Medicare population, our Medicaid population, they really don't have a whole lot of money. And as we see the prices of things going up, they're actually shopping not at the corners of the store, or the circle of the store, at the veggies and produce. They're buying canned and processed foods because their budget can only go far and they have a fixed income. They're not eating as well as they did in the 50s and 60s when they had the garden, when they actually nourished their bodies at a more foundational level. As you can see here, the caloric intake average is only 80% of the RDA for elderly men and 73% for women. That aging process occurring, they're malnourished. They may be overfed, but they're malnourished. I love this pathway. It brings back positive/bad memories of course, our basic science studies. But we didn't know what it was all about at the time, but now we do.